Hello, my name is Frank Wilkinson from SEI's Institutional Group. Joining me today to talk about the process of finding and hiring an outsourced Chief Investment Officer, or OCIO, is Stuart Comstock-Gay, the President and CEO of the Delaware Community Foundation. Founded in 1986, the Delaware Community Foundation helps communities and philanthropists help focus charitable resources for the greatest community benefit across the state of Delaware. Today, the foundation holds approximately $235 million in charitable assets, placing it among the largest community foundations in the country. In 2016, the foundation's leadership team and the 9-member investment committee began a process to find an investment management partner to suit the ever-changing needs of the organization. With that, we welcome you, Stuart, and we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today about your experience in finding an OCIO.
It's great to be here.
Good. So let's begin with some background information, Stuart. What was the investment management process that Delaware Community Foundation had in place prior to this?
Sure, we had a traditional investment consultant, like a lot of foundations, a lot of institutions, accompanied by an investment committee of volunteers, of investment experts from Wilmington and Delaware, who provided oversight to that group. The investment committee met roughly quarterly and set up the investment policy, and the consultant delivered on it.
Okay. So then what made you decide to take a look at an OCIO?
Well, we had not been entirely satisfied given the rapid changes in investing. As one of our committee members said, 10 years ago when an issue came up, you could take 6 months to decide. Now you need to take about a week to decide. And the structure, having a committee that met occasionally and an investment consultant that wasn't given a whole lot of authority outside of that, wasn't suiting us well. We needed what I said, we needed somebody with shower time on our investment, and we weren't getting that. We needed somebody who spent time thinking about what's going to happen today, what's going to happen tomorrow. Not to market time, but to really pay attention to changes and make recommendations and make decisions in real time. Okay.
So was the committee pretty much in complete agreement when you made the decision to go search for an OCIO?
People were hesitant about it at the very first instance, but once we started to have the discussions and we heard presentations and pitches about what an OCIO would do, it really turned pretty quickly.
Okay. Okay, Stuart, so when you decided to search for an OCIO, what were the key requirements you were looking for?
Well, we're looking for a number of things. First of all, we wanted somebody with experience in the OCIO world. Okay. Not somebody who said, yeah, that's a cool idea, we can do it. We were looking for somebody who had experience with community foundations because we have a particular kind of need in community foundations where the OCIO serves not just the foundation as the foundation, but in our case, 1,300 fund holders who also have some interests. And so we wanted somebody to understand that nuance of our business. And we really needed someone who was willing to spend time with us doing communications with our fund holders, being willing to visit with fund holders and explain the different processes.
So clearly you have a lot of specific criteria that you're looking for in an OCIO, and there are a lot of OCIOs out there. And a lot of them say they can do one thing, some can do another, some say they can do it all. Did you use any outside help, like an OCIO search consultant, in going through that process?
Yeah, we actually did not. We managed it through a combination of staff time, and we had some committee members who had experience, and they helped us develop RFP, work with us on the kinds of questions and the kind of discussion, people who'd been involved with OCIOs in the past. So we did it with our internal systems.
Okay. Wow. Very brave.
Yeah, foolish.
Okay, so now you've made the decision to look at an OCIO provider, and you mentioned a minute ago about the RFP.
Yep.
So the ever-intimidating RFP process. Some firms will have a lot of concerns about going through that process and what exactly it entails. How many service providers did you include in the RFP process, and how much research did you do in advance of that process before building it?
Well, we did a lot of research. I'll start with this. We actually reviewed and talked to initially, before any RFP, 13 different firms. Through just conversations. They were not interviews, they were not in-person visits, but it was phone calls, looking at website materials, looking at marketing materials, and that's where we started to say, let's get a framework for what these people are doing. That led us to the creation of a set of questions in an RFP, and we didn't do a fully blown formal RFP. We presented our materials and said, these are the things we need you to address. So it wasn't a long written RFP. And then we led to, with 5 firms, we ended up doing in-person interviews at the foundation offices with the full investment committee. Took that, we did second interviews with a handful of those firms where we brought them back in again, further refining, calling clients, digging into questions where we had problems, and then finally, after all of that, went and did site visits at 2 firms.
Okay.
And so the process was informed by those key questions I mentioned earlier, and then we had the discussions with each firm and did the reference checks on all of them.
Okay. So you had 13 firms that responded to the initial
13
RFP.
firms that responded to phone calls and discussions in more of an informal phase.
So talk a little bit about the process to get it from the 13 down to the 5.
Well, I talked about firms that had been highly recommended but had never done an OCIO before.
Okay.
We said we don't want to be your beta test on an OCIO.
And had you planned all along for the process to be eliminate some firms initially,
Yes.
site visits with a certain amount?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the initial process was 13 to 5. 5 came for finals presentations?
5 came for
Okay.
finals
And
presentations.
how did that work out?
That worked great because in each of those finals presentations, they walked out the door and we knew if they were going to continue or not.
Okay, good.
And so we got great clarity in those visits, and a few of the firms really stood up, so that it became clear we were going to be able to bring them back again and then do the site visits for the final 2.
And how specific were you with instructions for the firms for that finals presentation?
What we did in each case was say, here, particularly in the site visits, here are the specific things we're wondering about you. You need to convince us on A, B, and C. This is the weakness we've been wondering about, and so people spoke to it. And as is always the case, some firms do a better job answering the question than others. And it's the old thing, the question that doesn't get answered is the thing that's the problem.
Right, exactly. So then that made it relatively easy then to get from the 5 down to the 2.
5 down to the 2.
And then talk a little bit about those site visits. How did you orchestrate those?
Well, part of what we were looking for in the site visits was in those cases we said, here are the same questions. We gave the same set of questions to each firm. And we wanted to see how the firms would respond and what they would lead with. And in that, whether they would understand really what it is we were looking for from the questions. And we got very different presentations focusing on very different things, and it helped make our decision easier. And frankly, a lot of it was about the level of customer service that we would be getting, the level of service to the fund holders, that we needed that, we wanted that. We are nothing without our fund holders, and they need to feel confident just as we as staff need to feel confident. And a firm that can show us that they really get that means they understand community foundations and they understand what our challenges are.
Which is good, yeah. And then you follow a little bit of a different process, whereas we've seen RFPs with 70 plus pages of content. So you did it a little bit differently, and it sounds like you expanded it a little bit across a number of different activities. Is there anything you regret about the RFP process? Is there something you would do differently? You were giving advice to someone else going through this.
I think to the degree there is the advice I would have is to have a little more clarity in the public announcements about what you're doing. We were getting calls, what are you doing, when are you doing it? And if we'd been a little more clear publicly, it probably would have saved just a tiny bit of time that I spent explaining the process. We're completely happy with the results. We're completely happy with the breadth of our search and the depth of our search. We got everything we needed out of it, and we feel nothing but confident about it, but we probably could have communicated a little better.
Okay, good. Okay, Stuart, so the RFP process is complete. You've done you've had the finals presentations, you've done the site visits.
Yep.
Now your committee needs to make a decision.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that process and how you went from 2 to the ultimate OCIO you hired.
Well, what happened was we had a number of the committee members join us on the site visits. And what we did was we brought the investment committee back in again, and we laid out the particulars of each of the finalist firms, and we then presented a recommendation for who we wanted to choose and why and what the benefits were. Spent a fair bit of time in committee discussion, and the committee agreed, and then that presentation was then taken to our full board of directors, which also needed to endorse the decision, and we presented it to the board, and the board was excited, and there we are.
So that's great. The committee, was there a formal vote, or was it pretty much everyone in the
Formal
committee?
vote. Yep.
Formal vote.
There was a formal vote of the committee, so that's the process we have to use.
Okay.
That even though the people who went on the site visit were enthusiastic and unanimous, we needed to make sure that there was no doubt on the committee, and there really wasn't, which was nice.
And do you feel there was a benefit in having the committee involved all along, where they saw every step of the process?
Absolutely, because we are fundamentally changing the way we do investments in the foundation. I believe it's a trend that we're going to be seeing in more institutions. As investments are more complex than they were 10 and 15 and 20 years ago, you can't simply do it on weekends, as it were. You can't do it through quarterly meetings. meetings, we have to be spending shower time on our investment portfolio, and we don't have that expertise on staff. Our volunteers don't have the time, our board doesn't have the time, so hiring the OCIO was absolutely the right model. And once we got through that change, we wanted to make sure that the investment committee was fully 100% behind it, even those who initially were a little skittish.
Right.
And they are, and the vote proved it. The board is completely enthusiastic.
Okay.
Every meeting we've had with the board since then has been nothing but positive
That's
about
great.
this new direction of
great.
investments. And frankly, for our fund holders too.
Yeah.
That when I'm doing presentations about it, I've had people applaud and say about time, and we've got
good.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I just think it's the next iteration of professionalizing investment management.
Yeah. You made the decision, you hired the OCIO. What's changed in the time since that decision has taken
Well,
place?
yeah. So what's changed is, so the transition was made very quickly. The whole process took from the day we started getting serious about an OCIO to the day we transitioned all the funds was about 6 months.
Wow.
Moving the funds over. As we speak, our board has just approved a new investment policy statement,
Okay.
which provides more of the flexibility to the OCIO, and we've just approved the creation of multiple different pools, so we won't just be having one pool anymore, and we'll be rolling that out to the fund holders in the next months.
Okay, good. So you've had a couple of investment committee members meetings since the change?
We've had 2 investment
And
committee
it's
meetings
mostly been
since
about the change. Okay.
And I think what's important to point out is, look, a lot of people can do investments well, and a lot of people will do investments well, and it's going to be within a range. This is addressing this differently, giving ourselves a better chance
Yeah.
to succeed in the
Yeah.
in the market, because there are thousands upon thousands of really good investment people, but creating a structure like this gives us just a better chance.
Yeah, good, very much. Okay. Well, Stuart, thank you very much for your insight today. As you
Absolutely.
well know, OCIO is a growing trend. They're estimating that 50 to 60% of nonprofits will be adopting this model by the end of this year. There are a lot of firms out there that are thinking about going through a search and attempting to go through a search, and I think there's a lot of confusion. So any insight that someone who's been through the process can give is really, really helpful. So we appreciate you taking the time to offer this guidance, and we wish you the best of luck with Delaware Community Foundation in accomplishing your mission.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.